Okay, so you guys have sent in some really interesting material this time.
Yeah.
It's David R. Hawkins' book, Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender,
Right.
and particularly chapter 14, which really gets into this idea of reducing stress and physical illness.
Yeah, it's a fascinating chapter.
You know how it is, though, with like self-help stuff? Sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose.
Absolutely.
So many ideas and concepts, sometimes it can feel overwhelming.
Right.
So what we're going to try to do today is really distill this down to the most important insights. The stuff that you can really take away and actually use in your life.
Practical application, that's the key.
Yeah, without getting kind of lost in the weeds or bogged down in all the jargon.
Absolutely.
So just to give a little overview, Hawkins's whole approach really revolves around this idea of surrender.
Surrender is a big theme for him.
Yeah, surrendering negative emotions as like a pathway to finding inner peace and real emotional freedom.
Right. He calls it the letting go technique.
Right.
It's really about releasing those deep-seated beliefs and emotional baggage that we all carry around.
Yeah, it's like clearing out the clutter, but on an emotional level.
Exactly. And then chapter 14 specifically focuses on the relationship between stress and physical health.
Right. He takes a deep dive into how our bodies actually respond when we're stressed.
And the fascinating connection between those suppressed feelings that we were just talking about and our physical well-being.
Right. So what's in it for you listening to this deep dive? Well, hopefully by the end of our conversation, you'll have a much clearer understanding of where your stress is actually coming from.
The root causes.
Yeah, not just those obvious external pressures, but those hidden internal factors that might be driving it.
Those are often the bigger culprits.
Right. And we'll unpack what happens inside your body when you're under stress.
The physiological response.
Yeah. And most importantly, we'll explore some potential ways to reduce that impact and actually improve your health.
Drawing directly from the ideas in this book.
Exactly. So we might uncover some surprising connections, like the role of those often ignored suppressed emotions,
Those are crucial.
and even how the body's subtle energy system, like the acupuncture meridians, respond to all of this.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah. So our mission, as always, is to extract the essence of this material and make it really clear and engaging and, most importantly, useful for you.
We want to equip you with a solid understanding of stress and practical tools to manage it.
Tools you can actually put into practice.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right in. Hawkins starts off with a pretty bold statement, I thought. He
Yeah.
basically suggests that a state of peace is like our natural state.
It's inherently available to all of us.
But most people are walking around with this underlying constant sense of inner stress.
He's saying it's almost like the norm.
Yeah, and what's interesting is his argument about the source of most of that stress.
Right. He doesn't just blame it on the external world.
It's deeper than that, isn't
know.
it?
Much deeper, he argues that the primary cause of stress leading to both emotional and physical problems is largely psychological.
Really?
It's the accumulation of all those unacknowledged, suppressed, and repressed feelings.
Wow, so it's not just the bills and the deadlines.
It's the internal stuff that we're carrying around.
Interesting. So is he saying that the more we can let go of that emotional pressure, the less we'll experience the negative effects of stress?
Exactly. That's the essence of his letting go
Ugh.
technique.
So those external stressors, those are almost like the final trigger.
The straw that breaks the camel's back.
But the real burden is what we're already carrying inside.
Precisely so. Even when our external circumstances seem relatively calm, we can still be dealing with chronic internal stress.
Because of those unresolved emotions.
Exactly. Think about how often we seek distractions, constantly looking for something to stimulate us externally.
That's so true.
Hawkins even points out how our society makes it difficult to simply relax and be present.
That really resonated with me. That feeling of guilt when we're on vacation, like we should be doing something productive.
Or that underlying restlessness, that urge to always be entertained.
We're constantly trying to avoid being alone with our own thoughts and feelings.
He gives this great example of busy executives who almost look forward to going back to work.
That's crazy, but I can totally see it.
It's like that perpetual state of activity has become their comfort zone.
Even though it's probably adding to their stress levels.
It's a vicious cycle.
So this brings up a big question. The connection between those bottled up emotions, that internal stress, and the development of illness, both emotional and physical.
Right.
Hawkins suggests that by directly addressing and releasing those internal stress factors, we might actually be able to reverse disease.
That's a bold claim.
Even in cases where conventional medicine hasn't been successful.
He's talking about the power of the mind to heal the body.
And there are so many anecdotal reports of people recovering from serious illnesses through emotional and spiritual practices.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It makes you wonder if they were finally able to confront and process that underlying emotional baggage.
It's certainly a possibility.
He also introduces this idea of stress proneness.
Like, some people are just naturally more susceptible to stress.
And his point is that by acknowledging and letting go of those suppressed feelings, we can actually reduce our overall stress proneness,
Leading to better health and vitality.
so it's not just about coping with stress, it's about becoming less reactive to it in the first place.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the more conventional medical understanding of stress.
All right.
Hawkins defines stress as the body's physiological response to any perceived threat.
Any threat, whether it's real or imagined, internal or external, physical, mental, or emotional.
So it's a very broad definition.
It's not just about external events. It's about how we perceive and interpret them.
And it brings in the work of Dr. Hans Selye, who described this general adaptation syndrome.
The body's three-stage response to stress.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So first, there's the alarm reaction, that immediate fight or flight response.
Our primal survival mechanism.
Exactly. So here's the pathway. The cerebral cortex signals the hypothalamus, which then activates the adrenal glands.
Those are the stress hormone factories.
Right. They release cortisol and adrenaline into the bloodstream.
Flooding the body with those stress hormones.
And there's a cascade of brain hormones and stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system.
Getting the body ready for action.
Exactly.
So it's not just a feeling, it's a whole body physiological response.
And it can be quite intense.
He mentions how some people, particularly those in high-pressure environments, can actually get addicted to that adrenaline rush.
That feeling of heightened alertness and energy.
And then they experience a crash when things slow down, like during weekends or vacations.
They might even feel depressed or lethargic.
It's like they need that constant stimulation to feel alive.
It's a dangerous cycle.
Okay, so what's the next stage?
The second stage is resistance.
Resistance to what?
Resistance to the stressor the body tries to return to a state of balance or homeostasis.
By adapting to the ongoing stress.
Exactly. It involves hormonal adjustments, changes in metabolism, and mineral balance.
So the body is trying to compensate.
He gives the example of executives who develop swollen ankles as the work week progresses.
Due to sodium and water retention?
It's a classic sign of the body trying to cope with sustained stress.
And then there's the letdown effect on the weekends.
When cortisol levels drop suddenly.
And all those hidden physical symptoms that were masked by the cortisol can suddenly emerge.
Aches, pains, fatigue.
It's like the body's saying, okay, the crisis is over, now let's deal with the damage.
Right.
So what happens if the stress continues?
If it persists without adequate periods of relief, we enter the third stage, exhaustion.
That's when things get really serious.
The body's ability to cope starts to break down.
We're running on empty.
Adrenal exhaustion sets and the immune system becomes suppressed, and prolonged exposure to stress hormones can actually damage our organs.
Yeah. So chronic stress can literally make us sick.
It can increase our susceptibility to a wide range of illnesses.
He also talks about the specific impact of stress on different body systems like the gastrointestinal system.
Right, that initial alarm reaction can shut down digestion.
Reducing blood flow to the stomach lining.
But then as stress becomes chronic, it can lead to hyperacidity and an overproduction of digestive enzymes.
Which can damage the stomach lining and potentially lead to ulcers.
In severe cases, those ulcers can bleed or even perforate.
He also mentions the opposite scenario where prolonged stress can actually reduce stomach acid and enzyme production,
leading to indigestion and poor nutrient absorption.
So stress can mess with our digestion in multiple ways.
Absolutely.
And the cardiovascular system takes a hit too.
That alarm reaction can damage the heart, blood vessels, and kidneys over time,
increasing the risk of hypertension, heart disease, strokes, and heart attacks.
It's a sobering reminder of the toll that chronic stress can take on our physical health.
Okay, so let's move on to a perspective that's not always emphasized in conventional medicine.
The body's subtle energy system.
Specifically the acupuncture system.
Hawkins talks about 3 interconnected nervous systems.
We're familiar with the voluntary and autonomic nervous systems.
But he also brings in this bioenergetic acupuncture system,
where energy flows along specific pathways and is incredibly sensitive to our thoughts and environment.
It's a fascinating concept.
He describes it as the flow of vital energy through these 12 main meridians and their tributaries reaching all the organs.
It's like a network of energy channels.
And when this energy is blocked or imbalanced, it can contribute to disease.
It's like a disruption in the flow of life force.
And what's interesting is how quickly this energy system can react to our thoughts and feelings.
Unlike blood pressure or heart rate, which take time to change.
This energy can shift almost instantaneously.
He mentions the thymus gland as playing a key role in regulating this system.
And its connection to the immune system.
So chronic stress, doesn't just affect our hormones and nerves, it can also weaken our immunity and disrupt this energy flow.
He even talks about strengthening the thymus or using supplements to rebalance this energy.
Drawing on the work of Dr. John Diamond.
It's a whole different approach to managing stress beyond conventional medicine.
It's about working with the body's subtle energy.
And he cites some interesting research like the UCLA studies by Libeskind and Shavit on stress, immune suppression, and cancer.
They found that intermittent stress can affect the release of endorphins and the activity of those killer cells that fight tumors.
So stress can literally suppress our natural defenses against cancer.
And then there's that report in Science that highlighted how the central nervous system can actually modulate immune function.
Influencing the development and progression of disease, they found a connection between feelings of helplessness and a decrease in anti-cancer cell activity,
along with increased tumor growth.
So our thoughts and emotions can literally affect our susceptibility to disease.
It's powerful evidence for the mind-body connection.
And of course, we can't forget Robert Sapolsky's work on the stress response as a major precondition for illness.
His research is groundbreaking.
Hawkins also mentions the role of stress in the production of autoantibodies.
Those are antibodies that attack the body's own tissues.
And the potential for reversing this process through certain treatments.
So it's not always a one-way street.
There's hope for reversing some of these stress-induced immune problems.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now let's talk about some non-medical interventions like meditation.
That's a popular one.
He cites research on college students showing how meditation training led to reduced inflammation, less depression, and even improved immune function.
Compared to a control group that only received education about stress.
So it wasn't just knowledge, it was the practice of meditation that made the difference.
It's about training the mind.
He also mentions some unpublished research suggesting that these inner methods, like his letting go technique, might be even more effective than physical relaxation techniques.
Like progressive muscle relaxation.
In terms of reducing heart rate and blood pressure.
So it's not just about relaxing the body, it's about calming the mind.
And this brings us to kinesiology, or muscle testing.
A way to explore the mind-body connection directly.
Hawkins presents it as a tool for assessing the balance of the acupuncture and bioenergy systems.
It's based on the idea that sudden drops in this bioenergy can cause muscle weakness.
In response to negative energy in the aura.
Which can come from physical stimuli like certain substances.
But also, and more powerfully, from our own negative thoughts and feelings.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
He even encourages listeners to try the simple 2-person muscle testing procedure.
You know, have someone resist as you press down on their arm while they think of something neutral.
And then repeat it while they focus on something unpleasant.
The difference in muscle strength can be quite noticeable.
It's a tangible demonstration of how our thoughts can affect our physical state.
He does mention that for accurate results, both people involved should ideally be above a certain level of consciousness.
What he calls a consciousness level of courage, which is calibrated at 200 on his scale.
It's about having a certain level of integrity and empowerment.
But he gives all these other examples of things you can test using this method, like fluorescent lights, music, food, fabrics.
Illustrating that everything has a subtle vibration that can either strengthen or weaken us.
And what's amazing is that just holding a food that has a negative energy without even eating it can cause a weakening.
It's like our bodies are picking up on these subtle energies.
And what's really interesting is that when someone surrenders a negative feeling or thought, their muscle test can go from weak to strong.
Showing that those surrendered thoughts lose their power to deplete us.
So it reinforces this idea that we're primarily affected by what we hold in our own minds.
And that our bodies are incredibly responsive to our beliefs.
Which leads to this understanding that stress is subjective.
What stresses one person out might not bother another at all.
And muscle testing can reveal those unconscious beliefs that might be contradicting our conscious desires.
Like someone who wants to heal, but unconsciously might be attached to the benefits of being sick.
It's like self-sabotage.
Exactly.
And this ties back into the connection between our level of consciousness and our susceptibility to stress and disease.
Hawkins proposes that the higher our level of consciousness, the less we react to life events with stress.
So it's not just about managing stress, it's about raising our consciousness.
It's about evolving our way of being.
He uses the example of a car accident and how someone operating at a level of shame would react to that same event very differently from someone at a level of peace.
It's about how our internal state shapes our experience.
And he points out that most of us tend to operate within a certain dominant range on the scale of consciousness.
Many people are focused on survival, driven by fear, anger, and desire.
They haven't yet discovered the power of love and compassion.
as tools for navigating life and even enhancing survival.
He even mentions this interesting tidbit about pet ownership, particularly dogs being linked to a longer lifespan.
Up to 10 years,
He attributes this in part to the love and companionship that pets provide.
which can help mitigate stress and boost those feel-good endorphins.
It's like having a furry little stress reliever.
It all circles back to Hawkins' core message that we create our own stressful reactions based on our internal state, our suppressed feelings, beliefs, and perceptions.
And then we project those onto the external world, creating a self-reinforcing system of illusions.
It's like that ancient saying, we are all living in an illusion.
So to wrap things up, let's recap some of the key takeaways from all this material.
Right.
We explored the huge role that those often unrecognized suppressed emotions play in both our experience of stress and even the development of physical illness.
Those hidden emotional burdens.
We looked at the body's intricate physiological response to stress, from that initial alarm reaction to the potential for exhaustion.
That three-stage process.
We touched upon the concept of the body's bioenergy system and how it's affected by stress.
Those subtle energy pathways.
And we saw the mind-body connection in action through kinesiology.
Muscle testing as a window into our inner state.
And finally, we considered how our level of consciousness can influence our stress reactivity.
How our way of being shapes our experience.
So here's a final thought for you to ponder.
Take a moment to reflect on your own typical reactions to stress.
And ask yourself what specific suppressed feeling might be contributing most to your experience of pressure.
What emotional baggage are you carrying around?
And what might happen if you started to practice letting go, as Hawkins suggests.
Could you reduce your stress levels, improve your health, and even experience greater peace and freedom?
It's an invitation to explore the power of surrender.
And to discover the healing potential within.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the world of stress and its impact on our lives.
We've only scratched the surface.
If any of this has resonated with you, we encourage you to explore David R. Hawkins' book, Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender, in more detail.
Or delves deeper into kinesiology or the body's energy systems.
There's a whole world of knowledge out there waiting to be discovered.
And it all starts with a willingness to explore.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
And keep letting go.